everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss. I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders out here in California, and also somehow licensed in Montana. I don't know. You can make that up why I'm doing that, but it's a secret. Anyways, thank you all for joining me for this podcast. So this is a question and answer based podcast, and I'm going to be answering a question today from one of the listeners. So if you would like your question answered on a future episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com, send me a question over there by clicking the submit a question link. You can also send an audio question that way by sending me the link to a shared Google Drive of it. You can send me the audio to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or you can go over to Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over there, and you can just send me an audio over the DM that way. So either way, there are lots of ways to get me your questions, and today I'm going to be answering a question from Maya. Maya sent me a question recently. I'm answering one of the more recent ones instead of one of the archived ones. For no particular reason. I've been just kind of mixed things up. We haven't talked about Real Event OCD in quite some time, so I think that would be a good one to chat about. So we are going to delve into that in just a minute. So it's a bit of a longer question, so I'll be reading a little bit, but I hope everybody out there is doing well. Thank you all for letting me be a part of your recovery journey. I know that this podcast is kind of an oddball one in the sense that, just being question answer, you send me in your questions and I think about them and consider them and respond to them. But, I started this podcast a while ago, 6-7 years ago, something like that, with the idea that, there wasn't anything like this out there, that, therapy is hard to find. Good information and helpful information can be hard to find. And, it's hard to find someone who can perhaps answer some, a simple question, a hard question about OCD and kind of expand on that other than, the 5 minutes that you might get now in a Facebook live thing or an Instagram live thing. So I've appreciated doing this. I've really liked doing this podcast and being able to answer all these questions and just hearing the broad range of the way, OCD and anxiety spectrum stuff manifest. It's super fun. It's super interesting. It never gets old for me, and I hope it never does. So anyways, keep your questions coming. I'm going to keep doing this until I stop getting questions, and even then, I might still answer some questions after and just make them up. I'm not going to make them up. I do want to specify, I have never made up any of the questions on here. They started via Reddit, the OCD subreddit. I got some initial questions there and then started getting questions from listeners, and it's been snowballing from there. So again, it's been a fun adventure. All right. Why don't we just get into the question? So I'm going to say this question involves some sensitive topics for some, involves topics of grooming, involves topics of kind of secrets or potentially lying or things like that. So if you're particularly sensitive to that, or if you have kids who you don't want to necessarily hear that type of stuff, then you be the judge. You're the boss of you, not me, some ridiculous podcaster. All right. So here's the question coming from Maya. Maya says, "Hello, and thank you for taking questions. It makes the podcast so relatable and comforting to know that I'm not alone." Maya, that is another good reason why this podcast exists. And another good reason why I really, really like the audio questions when I do get those. Real people, real listeners are sending these in. So rather than just my ridiculous voice out there, I'd love to hear your voice. Anyways, Maya, here we go. So she says, "I have real event OCD and the compulsions to confess and to seek reassurance. I also experience extreme guilt. 2 weeks ago, I confessed something to my fiance that hurt his feelings. He told me, no more OCD confessions. Next time it wants you to confess, tell it no. Stop trying to ruin a good thing." And she says parenthetically, "We have a new baby and everything in life is going wonderfully. Don't you worry, Maya. OCD will have some words about that." All right, so she goes on to say, "Yesterday he asked me if I have any more secrets I'm hiding, and he worries that I'm hiding something big. I lied and told him no. It was a lie because there's something else that has been causing me excessive guilt that I've debated telling him about. My therapist and friends told me that I don't need to tell him about it because it would cause unnecessary pain. It needs to be left in the past, and I've never had bad intentions. All right, so she's going to share it. So we're all going to decide whether or not her question to the podcast is confession or is reassurance seeking. You decide. Okay, so we're just going to get into that. So she says, in short, what happened was that last year I went back to work part-time and temporarily for a boss that I used to fool around with 7 years ago, but never slept with. I didn't think anything about it because it had been so long, and I have zero interest in him as I was pregnant. Okay, at this point, I'm just going to jump in and say, I'm interpreting this, and I think hopefully everybody else is doing this, but when I first read this, I was very confused. I'm going to assume you worked with him recently. You fooled around with him 7 years ago. You were not pregnant then, but you were pregnant recently when you were working with him. Okay, that's what I'm going with. Anyways, 5 months ago, he made some inappropriate conversation by telling me that telling me what his wife likes in the bedroom. He kept asking me questions about what my fiance are into, and I tried to redirect and share only non-sexual things about us. First off, good. Okay, good. All right, next. I get too shy and not assertive enough, so I answered a couple of his questions. I ended up quitting earlier than planned because of him. I feel so guilty for not cutting him off, not stopping him, and for going back to work there in the first place. My therapist and friend made me realize that this man has been conditioning me since early in my 20s to allow for his inappropriate behavior. So, when my fiance asked me if there was anything else I'm hiding, I said no, because I think that it's best for our relationship and our new family that I leave this in the past. However, I feel extremely guilty for lying about not hiding anything else when not hiding anything else when this mistake I explained has been on my mind. I think that telling him no was actually telling OCD no. I want to be honest, but it would cause unnecessary pain and distrust. I'm afraid the guilt of lying will haunt me forever. Is there anything here I should tell him? What is the best solution for this? Thank you for reading. So Maya, thank you for sending in this question. Real Event OCD is tough. It's really tough because it feels like in some cases. In some cases it just feels like, in some cases it is. It is a moral decision that you are ultimately making here. And this is not to say that you are making an immoral decision one way or another, though OCD would like you to think about that. Sometimes in life there is no good option. There is no good option sometimes. I tell everybody, when we're stuck between these two choices, some people get really upset or frustrated that they're, debating those questions and they're fighting with themselves and all this stuff. And they're like, I need to pick the right thing. It's like, if there was a right thing, you would have done it. You would have chosen it and you would have gone forward with it without even debating it. The reality is the two things that you're stuck between both have pros and both have cons. It's important to recognize that, because it's not that you aren't able to find the right choice and that some smarter person or some less OCD person or some whatever person would be able to figure it out quickly. It's that sometimes there are no good choices. So ultimately what we have to do is make a choice. We weigh the pros and cons and we consider things, and you do what you did. You talk to your friend, you talk to your therapist, you weigh the pros and cons, and then ultimately we have to round up. Even if it's just 51% good and 49% kind of bad, and I'm using broad terms, good, bad, you know what I'm saying. We round up and we have to see where it goes. And and doing that, making the choice is the fighting against rumination. It's the fight against constantly going back to the same information, ruminating about the same stuff. We do think about things, we do consider good and bad and pros and cons and outcomes and other people's feelings and our values. But at some point, we will have to choose and then go and see how it shakes out. And between now and when it explodes, we sit with and deal with the feelings of uncertainty, the feelings of, it's unclear about what's going to happen. And oh man, I hope it turns out fine. And I dread the potential outcome. But we don't waste our time in that. We move forward trying to figure out the best thing in our life as best we can, right? And I say the best thing, it's like sometimes it's the best of a crappy choice, right? Or crappy collection of choices. So I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself perhaps, but again, it's very possible that kind of your podcast question was hoping to get some reassurance or some direct advice or guidance on exactly advice. The new word, everybody, advice. Or anyways, advice or guidance on what to do, as if to say that this podcaster here is going to know the right thing to do. I'm going to disabuse you of that, Maya, and everybody else out there. I don't know the right thing to do because I don't think there is a right thing to do. There is a thing to do that you're going to move forward with. And there are going to be pros and cons to those choices, right? I will say, I'm proud of you for in that making a decision to say no at the time that you did, right? You got direct. First off, I'll say this. Let's go back. Your boyfriend, or your fiance initially said like, no more OCD confessions, and then came back and was like, hey, I know I said no OCD confessions, but is there anything that you're hiding? All right. I think that was kind of setting you up for something. I don't know if it probably was not malicious. I can't think that was a malicious or trying to put you in this kind of pickle. But I know, unfortunately, this type of thing can put you in kind of a pickle. I'm wondering if, while he said no more confessions and, next time he wants you to confess, say no. I wonder if during that time you were in your head and he was observing it, he saw it, you in your head ruminating and doing a lot of mental compulsions. And I want to talk a little bit about some mental compulsions in a bit. But I wonder if that's what he was noticing, because then he said, he said, all right, if there are any more secrets, and he's wondering if he's hiding something big, right? And wondering if you were doing a lot of mental compulsions and in a lot of anguish and stress and guilt because this has been weighing on you. And he saw that. And, in the absence of information, and I think, you and I and all of us listening know, in the absence of clear, direct information, our brain is going to go everywhere in trying to figure out what in the heck it is. And oftentimes, our ridiculous brain, in all of its wisdom, in all of its stupidity, and, led by, magical anxiety, is going to fill in worst case scenarios. Right? It's important to recognize that that's, to a certain degree, that's what anxiety's job is to give you worst case scenarios so that you can avoid the worst case scenario or kind of prep yourself for something bad. But I wonder if that was happening for your boyfriend, and I'm sorry he set you up and you kind of fell into that trap. Anyways, so I'm proud of you for saying no when you did, but it served as a new trigger for this real event obsessions. And if you already have a history of a real event, that kind of stinks. And this is that trade-off, right? You said no. Okay. Because you were honoring what your previous agreement was. No more confession. Great. And in a sense, that can be helpful. It might be helpful to also redefine how you can share things and how you can share things that may be weighing on you, because there may be a one and done type of discussion where you share something, a one and done confession. It's